Hey guys, welcome to the show today. We had a wonderful trip for the second tour stop of the White Rose Resistance National Live Tour at my forever home church, Godspeed Calvary Chapel, with Pastor Rob McCoy. And while there, we were able to sit down again with my good friend Bryce Eddy, the Brazilian Jiu Jitsu black belt entrepreneur, co-host of Liberty Station with Pastor Rob McCoy, and the newly dubbed Christo-fascist by the leftists, pornographic, obsessed, degenerate activists in the Thousand Oaks, California area, because Bryce has stood up against the sexualization of children and the pornographic sex ed and critical race theory being pushed on minors in public schools in California. As the left begins to throw public opinion and polling in the trash and quadruple down on every unpopular, perverted, and evil agenda item that they have, Bryce and I discussed this four-pronged attack in the leftist culture wars today. You lie, and then when you're called out for the lie, you redefine everything. And then when you're called out for changing definitions, you censor and shut up your opponents. And when they won't shut up, you label them as dangerous threats to democracy and freedom in America, which the White House press secretary under Joe Biden, Karine Jean-Pierre, just said the other day that pro-life conservatives are the greatest extremist threat to democracy today. Well, when they say our democracy, they just mean their oligarchy or liberalism. And then Bryce gave me permission to speak my truth and share my journey to identifying as transvaccinated. And we discuss the old ancient heresy that undergirds and animates most of the progressive creeds today. As freedom and liberty begins to crumble, as the unborn and pro-lifers are focused in for attack from the liberal establishment, Bryce and I issue a final wake-up call to the church and discuss what kind of story we're going to want to tell at the marriage supper of the Lamb. Buckle up, you're in for a treat. I'm Seth Gruber, and this is Unaborted.
Seth Gruber, my man, how are you?
Good, brother.
You're one of the few, in fact, maybe even the only transvaccinated guy I know. And
we're gonna go right into it, huh?
You
jump right into it. Okay. All right.
Well, hey, so since we're simulcasting this, and we're gonna have this on your show and on Liberty Station,
Well, I'll tell you something, Bryce. Our episode together recently on Unaborted, I think I called it something like Real Men Are Pro-Life, something simple like that. People really liked that episode. It performed pretty well. Probably had a little bit more to do with your biceps than my ideas.
That's why I wear tight t-shirts. That's it, man. It's mediums or boys large.
That's right.
Yeah, that's the key.
But here we are back at the studio. Moved my family to Kansas.
Yeah.
So we could have the family structure support system with my job, and back in Pastor Rob's studio, which was mine for my show, and having fun hanging out. We'll be doing the White Rose Resistance National Live Tour for my new organization on Sunday, September 4th at Godspeed Calvary Chapel, all 3 services. And I think we're doing like 9 or 10 churches. This is number 2. All before the end of November.
Wow.
And got like 5 churches that are wanting 2023. Turning Point Faith sponsored and promoted. And so very excited about that. This is how we're getting this organization off the ground, because we are in deep need of Christian resistance in a post-Roe America and in this current political moment.
Yeah, and I think it goes beyond just the abortion debate at this point, because I'm sure you've seen some of the videos that are coming out that are sort of propaganda against Christians.
Yep.
And some of the movement, of course, I joke on the show that I'm a Christo-fascist, Bryce Eddy, and Christian nationalist.
Didn't people who hate you label you that?
Yeah, of course.
Isn't that always fun?
Yeah, of course. And then
deplorables.
The latest, that's the new deplorable.
Ultra MAGA.
Ultra
MAGA.
Ultra MAGA. I didn't vote for Donald Trump the first time around. And now partly because I live here in California and I didn't think it counted. And so I wanted to be able to have these authentic conversations with people and say, hey, he wasn't my guy, because he really wasn't my guy. And then he ended up surprising me and I think most conservatives, and he governed quite conservatively, and he did some pretty epic things.
Well, the most conservative president in my lifetime.
Yeah, no, true. And it's wild to see that what the political opposition has done to him, and now what they're afraid of conservatives, they're afraid of Christians, and so they have to work to silence our voices. So, you have a hostile Department of Justice, you have a hostile FBI, which is their enforcement arm, and so now you've got them calling us terrorists. Stochastic terrorist is the latest made-up term, by the way. And yes, it is made up. Just because stochastic is a mathematical term, you guys combine these two words, never before talked about, and then all of a sudden it's everywhere within 1 week. Okay. Some PR guy got a hold of that one.
One of the reasons that you and I, have called Godspeak Calvary Chapel home, and why we love Rob so much, is because he, more than so many pastors, understand the importance of being a student of history, which is really just being a student of your family. Many of us have been here for generations. Why would you not want to know the history of your family, what struggles they went through, how they got to America, how they built themselves up, and the country that enabled them to do that. But we've forgotten history for so long, and I know it's an old axiom, but it's no less true because of it, that those who forget their history are doomed to repeat it. And so everything you just described, Bryce, about what do we want to call it on today's show? The liberal establishment, the culture of death, the blob, the theocracy of secular progressivism, it's all the same thing. The attacks that they're ramping up against Christians, but you know what? Anyone who is a heretic of their regime, who dares oppose them, who dares show up at a school board meeting and says, I'm a father of 2 kids, and you're pushing pornographic, quote unquote, sex ed in the classroom, you're a disgusting pervert, and we're going to primary you. And Merrick Garland, the Attorney General of the United States, come out because he's still pissed off that he didn't get a seat on the Supreme Court. Yeah. This is his fury against conservatives for withholding him that seat. And he labels us domestic terrorists. But if you were an actual domestic terrorist in Antifa or BLM, and you burnt down whole city blocks in America's major metropolitan cities, much of which were black-owned businesses, Kamala Harris tweets out fundraising links to raise the fund to pay your bail to get you back out on the street. These terms, domestic terrorism, man, woman, reproductive health care, misinformation, science, these terms mean nothing. It's like talking to someone from another country, Bryce. Leftism really comes with a lexicon, and if you don't read it, you don't know how to understand what they're saying. I'm not speaking hyperbolically. Literally, we say the same words and we mean polar opposite things. So what does that do to a republic? What does that do to the social fabric? It causes chaos. And there's a spirit who's been known to cause chaos for generations. Amen. His name's the Lord of Flies, the Prince of Demons, Satan himself, that serpent, that snake, and his followers will cause chaos as well, because in so doing, they can upend society, burn it down to the ashes, and recreate it in their own images. And so all of these attacks against those who would speak truth and contend for truth in life in the public square are revealing what Christians need to wake up to, that the culture war was really just always a proxy war for the spiritual war.
That was a beautiful exhortative rant.
Well, that's what you and I do, bro.
I know, I love it.
I still think people would have paid for our 2 whiskeys in conversation in Montana on our bear hunt trip. Oh yeah, but people will just have to wonder about that again.
Yeah. I wish we could have filmed that one. That would have been great pod. Great pod. No, you know what? It's absolutely insane what's happening, because you're right. Going back to the language, they do use words and mean something completely different. And then when you say, wait a second, that's not what that means, a day or two later, they go to, Merriam-Webster and they have them change the definition.
Yep.
I mean, we've watched that happen.
Yep.
I think by my count 3 or 4 times this
That's
year,
right.
where they have changed the definition after we have objected to the meaning of the word. I mean, literally, that's what they have
And
done.
here's why that's important, Bryce, because language shapes the way we think, and it colors the way that we see the world.
Sure.
And so language in our book, the book of reality that we live in, Bryce, they're pointers, right? Language is a point. Words are pointers.
Yeah.
Because when I say the word man, I know this is trippy. I know listeners are going to freak out on this, all your Christo-fascist tyrant followers, Bryce. But when I say man, I actually don't mean woman.
Yeah.
So words are pointing to something
bigot.
that exists in the real world.
Right.
So when you redefine all of that, it causes confusion and chaos. And here's the thing, and this is a lesson from the Nazis, Bryce. If you tell a lie long enough and you say it over and over and over and over again, people will eventually come to believe it. That's not me. Bryce, that's Joseph Goebbels, the Nazi propagandist, who once famously defined the term fake news. And Bryce, he said, if you tell a lie big enough and you keep repeating it, people will eventually come to believe it. The state, or he said that the state must exercise all of its powers to repress dissent and shield the people from the political consequences of the state's lies, because the truth is the mortal enemy of the lie.
Yep.
And therefore, by extension, says Goebbels, the truth is the greatest enemy of the state. The liberal regime in America today, Bryce, has just imbibed the Joseph Goebbels approach to the culture wars, because they know that what they're saying is a lie, but they'll just repeat it over and over and over again, redefine everything. And they know that, unfortunately, history has taught us a lot of people will go along with it.
Yeah, I mean, that's why they use euphemisms, because euphemisms are the perfect thing. This gender-affirming care euphemism that's like the latest big one, right?
Gender-affirming care,
Gender-affirming care.
Yeah.
Well, you don't
genital
believe in
mutilation.
Gender-affirming
You mean cutting off
care.
a 5-year-old's penis? Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. Now, this is the part, Seth, where I have to correct you. They aren't cutting off 5-year-olds' penises. They wait until they're 15.
It's just 8. Oh no, what is it now?
Well, no, I mean, look, the truth isn't, because we'll get called out on this, is that there's documented evidence and instances, and their own words, and on video, they're admitting that there is no gone through the proper procedures. There's no age that's too young. That just came out, and this one particular doctor that is estimated to have earned $20 million doing these has said that, right?
Wicked.
They'll say, oh, well, okay, certain things are not being done, but then we do know that they're doing mastectomies at as early as 13, 14, 15. Yep. They're admitting all of this stuff.
Healthy girls just lopping off body parts.
What is going to come, and now they'll say, oh, the data shows that they're very happy afterwards and there's been no problems, all stuff. Okay, they've been doing this for
there's no long-term data.
All of 2 weeks they've been doing this stuff, and they've been pushing this on us in this new dystopian reality that we're in. The coming effects of this, we're going to have Chloe Cole on the show here in a couple of weeks. I've got Scott Nugent coming on as well. And so people that have gone through those things where they describe how they were pushed through that process or encouraged through that process or groomed through that process.
Yep.
And been told that, all of the ailments and all the things that you're feeling frustrated and confused by and all these things that are going on
it's
in
because
you.
Of Republicans.
Yeah,
Christians.
We know
they don't
it is.
affirm you.
It's
That's
because conservatives don't affirm your identity.
And they blame the suicide rate in the transgender and homosexual community to people who won't affirm their gender delusions. Back to the othering of conservatives and pro-lifers, labeling us as the threat to democracy, us as the domestic terrorists, that we're murdering transgender people as if there is even such a thing as a transgender person.
Well, I have a message.
Our refusal to affirm, quote unquote, their reality.
I have a message to these whack job parents that are allowing this to happen, because it is their responsibility when these kids are young like this and you're putting them on puberty blockers. And we should not be apologizing for this at all, for opposing this, and we shouldn't be backing down, which is what they want us to do.
Yeah, that's right.
But the truth is is they are going to have a rough time, you whack jobs, in 7 to 10 years. And that is being proven out. And now we're going to have a big spike and a big collection of
You're going to have
these
adult children
poor
suing their
kids.
parents.
All of these kids that needed guidance, needed love, needed help through what I believe can be genuine confusion, okay? And there are genuine instances of gender dysphoria. I don't believe all of these cases are gender dysphoria. I believe a lot of these are akin to, what we had with cutting or twitching or, all these manifestations.
It's a social contagion. Yeah.
It is a social contagion. And again, there are real people that suffer from gender dysphoria, and those people need to be loved through that as well. And you need to take care of these people, and you need to affirm reality.
You know what's funny? Let's speaking of reality, Bryce, is that if this is all natural and biological, and this is part of the progressive ascent into justice, right? The arc of history is long, but it bends towards justice, Obama told us, right? If this is all part of the moral arc of the universe, then why do we never see the same data from other parts of the world? You know what? Other parts of the same country, Bryce. It's very funny when you look at transgender quote-unquote rates across the country. They tend to be in blue states and big blue cities, and it's far less.
Seth, that's because blue states are more accepting, and they feel safer.
See, of course, that's the response.
They feel safer in these environments. And like there's a recent.
But then you just do
TikTok.
the years. You just look at 1960.
Yeah.
1950. Same Democrat-run cities, and suddenly Democrats, they were wicked then. I guess Democrats were transphobes in those cities in the 50s, and now they're excited. No, of course not, because it's a social contagion.
Yeah, well, libs of TikTok shot out a video of this teacher. Of course, she's got the Halloween hair, and she's there saying, all of my kids, no, not all of them, like 20 kids in my class came out as non-binary. Wow, can you imagine that they can only feel safe here in my classroom to do this?
Groomer.
And I think it was like second graders or something like that. I mean, that's wicked. It's silly as well.
Yep.
These are very vulnerable kids that should be being protected in the care of a school teacher
second
as well.
Grade, wow.
But your second graders, second grade is
that 7 or 8?
Like 6, 7, I think. Yeah,
wild.
And
I
so,
could get my son will be 7 in 2 years, a little over 2 years. I have no doubt in my mind that if I said it enough and I acted and lived like it, I could full-blown get my son to believe at 7 years old that Jedis exist. Full-blown, no doubt about it.
We get him to believe Santa Claus exists.
Yeah.
Sorry for the kids that are listening. I didn't mean to get that spoiled.
in the car right now.
Whoops.
What, Mom? What did Mr. Eddy say? Yeah. So it's like, kids are so impressionable, and they'll believe anything that they're told, especially if the lie is repeated enough times. And it hasn't been funny in the last year or so, Bryce, to watch the left lose their mind over one of the best constructed phrases on the conservative side of the aisle. And of course, that word or phrase is okay, groomer.
Yeah.
Because what did they say about any conservative who was over 50 that they hated? They called it okay boomer, right? Or whatever,
Yeah.
And so the conservatives were like, okay, groomer. And they freaking hated it.
Well, because it was great.
And
I sat with a guy, had a cup of coffee with him, and gay man, gay married, delightful cup of coffee, actually. Very left wing, very on the other side of me. He's been listening to this, so he can be my personal fact checker, and literally, but I liked him. I did. And his argument was that you can't use that term because that term is an attack against the whole of the LGBTQ community. But it's not.
No, not at all.
It's an attack against the people that are grooming children.
There's a very popular Instagram account called Gays Against Groomers.
Yeah, it is. But it is a direct attack against people that are behaving in those actions, regardless of any of their sexual orientation. And I believe, and that's true. I have not seen. I mean, now there are jerks and there are nasty people online that are disparaging people for all sorts of reasons and doing all sorts of wickedness.
Yeah.
But by and large, it is precisely directed at the people that are engaging in a particular behavior, and that behavior is the sexualization of little kids and giving them inappropriate content at young ages against the will of parents especially.
Yep, especially, yeah. If you're talking about sex things and sex anything with children, you are by definition a groomer.
Well, that's,
if you're not the parent.
And that is true because you have... like when you have to go become a coach on a kid's soccer team and things like that, you actually go through training to be able to identify that. And
you want to know something wild, Bryce?
Yeah.
So if you should actually have this guest on Liberty Station. Her name's Audrey Werner. I just had her back on for the second time, and she is one of the most knowledgeable people about what we call sort of the long walk through the institutions, but as it pertains to the culture wars, and as it pertains to the sexualization of children, the legacy of Alfred Kinsey, the Sexuality Information Education Council of the United States, which now has like various like branches off that tree, like Health Connected Teen Talk or Advocates for Youth. If you've heard of any of these organizations, they're branches off of that same tree, or that same large branch called the Sexuality and Information Education Council of the United States, started by Mary Calderon, the former medical director for Planned Parenthood, with seed money from Hugh Hefner, with a board member named Wardell Pomeroy, who had been the executive director of the Kinsey Institute at Indiana University and was part of the pro-incest lobby, and told Time magazine in a 1980 interview that incest between children and adults can sometimes be beneficial. All of that to Kinsey, who's the sort of the tree itself, and then all of the roots, which are all these sort of communist, socialist, sexually obsessed culture warriors.
Yes.
Okay, so Audrey Werner made an interesting observation on my show recently. A point of fact, rather, that did you know, Bryce, before 1972, interesting, the year before Roe v. Wade. So when you study the sexuality education campaign and the abortion industry, you're basically driving on the same highway. Those two lanes go the same place, and they're right next to each other the whole time. It's a fascinating conversation. So before 1972, Bryce, if you said the phrase sexual intercourse, that's it. If you said the phrase sexual intercourse in a public school, you could either be sued or convicted for grooming, for saying the phrase sexual intercourse. Now we have pictures of men doing dogs and every range of masturbatory sexual positions in 5th, 4th, 3rd grade curriculum. And it's totally fine, Bryce, because it's just follow the science. Don't you know that you bigot?
In Teen Talk, they put in the abstinence chapter anal sex.
Yep.
And oral sex.
Yep.
That is not abstinence, folks.
Yep.
Oh, yeah, we teach abstinence. That's why they did that, by the way. We teach abstinence.
Well, back to redefine everything, Bryce.
That's it.
Here's another example on the abortion issue. Did you know that when the abortion industry wanted to start popularizing and selling the pill, right, the birth control pill, ACOG, the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, a radically pro-abortion group, by the way. We've done whole episodes on that. Radically pro-abortion. They've opposed every state-level pro-life legislation or bill in the country. Okay, and that's the College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists. You're supposed to be about protecting patients. Hippocratic oath. No, kill the babies. Okay. When they wanted to start selling the pill, you know what they did? They colluded to redefine the broadly held consensus and definition that life began at conception to life beginning at implantation, because the pill, Bryce, if it doesn't prevent conception, because I meet people in my talks all the time. Sometimes I get these questions. Hey, Seth, so my mom was on the pill when she got pregnant with me, right? So it's not foolproof. But one of the things that it can do if it fails to prevent conception is it can be an abortifacient.
Right.
Meaning it prevents implantation. So they wanted to waylay the concerns of pro-lifers who understood that life began at conception by just redefining that human life doesn't begin at conception, it begins at implantation. The medical establishments, they did this, they redefined, and they've been redefining everything ever since.
Yeah, that is their thing. Fascinating. 1984, George Orwell, which you should read it. I read it this last year to my kids. Wow. My girls are now grown women.
Yeah,
But we were reading at the dinner table and over about the last year. At the end of it, it's got this afterword that includes this whole thing on language. And that is the best part of that entire book, because it lays out, if you eliminate words, if you change words, if you reduce the language down, that's why they had newspeak, then it does prevent people from thinking.
The ministry of truth.
Yeah. And it's
Oceania has always been at war with East Asia, Bryce.
That's right.
Well, the character Winston in Orwell's book, it's actually a fascinating line from the book, maybe the most fascinating line from the book. And like Bryce said, you guys should all go read it. But he said, in the end, the party would declare that 2 and 2 made 5. And you would have to believe it. It was inevitable that they should make this claim sooner or later. You see, the logic of their position demanded it. Mm-hmm. Not merely the validity of experience, but the very existence of an external reality was tacitly denied by their philosophy. The heresy of heresies was common sense. That is leftism today in America.
Yeah.
Not merely your experience as a conservative pro-lifer, but the very fact that there could be an external reality out there that we're beholden to is denied by the philosophy of leftism. Say that 2 and 2 makes 5, Bryce. Say a man can be a woman. Say a woman can be a man. Say preborn babies aren't persons. Say gender-affirming care is healthcare. Say abortion is healthcare. Yeah. And the only way that we're going to resist that as Christians is by beginning with resistance. We can't end with resistance, but we must never play party to a lie.
Well, we missed out because we played party to a lie. Mm-hmm. And again, and Matt Walsh, I've said this on the show, and I always want to give him credit, but he articulates that process really, really well. Where it started with our tolerance, right? Now,
well, you went viral on my Instagram reels when you were on my podcast for saying this.
Yeah. Okay. Good. But I mean, it's
say it again.
Yeah, it's a huge thing because they wanted tolerance, and that idea. I mean, as a believer, we want to love other people, right? We want to live and let live. Right. God is going to judge.
Well, they also redefined tolerance. That's the whole point.
Well, that's exactly right. So now they've never been tolerant of us. The people right now that we're fighting against, like the people that are in my feed. Calling us Christo-fascists and things like that. They want us dead.
Oh yeah.
I mean, they're the people who are calling us, the party of hate, the party of bigotry, all that stuff. They want us not to exist, not to be able to exercise our free speech, not to be able to say our opinion, even if it doesn't step on them.
Yep.
Just us saying, no, we are not game for this, and we don't like this, and we don't want this to enter into our household, right? No, you cannot exist.
Because it's an alternative opinion, and people will tend to believe it, which means they'll tend to reject liberalism.
Yeah, so now we were tolerant, by the way, Christians, of a whole bunch of things that we ought not to have been tolerant
all the way back to the 60s.
All kinds of things, And so anyway, so they wanted tolerance. They kind of got that. Then they wanted acceptance. They want us to just be like, oh, yeah, fine, it's right. They don't want us to just tolerate it. They want us to accept it and say,
gay marriage is marriage. Right. Give us marriage.
Then it is, okay, now we want you to celebrate it. Okay.
Participate. That's right.
No, celebrates that part where, okay, now you got to fly the flags too. You've got to put in your profile, your pronouns, all that sort of stuff. And then it goes to that participation, and that participation level is where we are saying, oh yeah, of course men can get pregnant, absolutely, most definitely, that's right. They want us to be at that point, and if we don't go along that spectrum, again, they want us to be dead.
Yep, that's right. Today, political correctness, Bryce, just means lies. Political correctness is just to say the lie. Because every phrase and word that is politically correct in today's American political discourse is a lie. There's this fascinating, I shared this on a podcast episode with a pastor recently, and we actually reposted on my podcast as well. I don't know if I shared it with you, Bryce, but I think Liberty Station listeners, and you will appreciate this. He's a prison physician and psychiatrist in England. And he wrote a phenomenal book called Life at the Bottom about the worldview of the underclass. And he goes by a proxy. He's actually been on Jordan Peterson's podcast. But I encourage you guys to check him out. I'll give you the name in 1 second because his name just slipped my mind. But he said, in my study of communist societies, I came to the conclusion that the purpose of communist propaganda was not to persuade or convince, not to inform. The purpose was to humiliate. And therefore, the less it corresponded to reality, the better. When people are forced to remain silent, when they are being told the most obvious lies, or even worse, Bryce, when they're forced to repeat the lies themselves, celebration, they lose once and for all their sense of integrity.
Yeah.
To assent to obvious lies, Bryce, in some way makes one evil oneself. And then your standing to resist anything is thus eroded and destroyed. A society of emasculated liars is easy to control. And I think if you examine political correctness, it has the same effect and is intended to. Political correctness is communist propaganda writ small. Say the lie, and we're going to lie to you so blatantly, like so shamelessly, that it'll scandalize you.
Yeah.
So that the power of the mob will either force you into silence, or the desire to protect yourself and your family will force you into participation, to say the lie too, to go along, to get crumbs from the table of secular progressivism, so your leftist friends won't come after your family, so you can keep your place at the table, so your career won't be compromised by today's tyrants and the theocracy of secular progressivism.
Yeah.
But then you will have no respect for yourself anymore. It's almost a psychological assassination to murder the soul and the spirit, because if you can get them to participate in a lie, they won't stand up against much else. And in the long run, Bryce, they won't even have any respect for themselves anymore, for playing party to the most blatant of all lies. And if we've ever seen blatant lies being spread and celebrated, it's never been more so than this moment right now in American political history. And so C.S. Lewis, seeing almost all of this, gave a powerful description of where that leads for the soul of the Christian in the country. So maybe we'll get to that later.
That's beautiful. Man, I love just winding you up and go. I did that over a couple of whiskeys too, and it's just seen it. Man, I don't even know where to go from here in our culture right now, because it is other than there's a somewhat wait and see. You know, now I've irritated a couple of people because I've said, all right, hey, save the receipts and we'll see. Because because a lot of the seeds that are being sowed right now as, oh no, this is good, this is important, this is great. Yep. You know, the transgender thing is only one of those things. Over time, we're going to see the destruction. Yep. You know, the experimental vax, all of those sort of things that are happening right now. The little bit of tyranny here and there. Yep. I said it, 2 years ago. The moment we locked down, we're going to have food shortages.
Yep.
We're going to have serious supply chain issues, and people are going to go hungry, and it's going to be a tragedy. You saw President Trump victoriously, be vindicated because he said to a laughing German diplomat crowd, he said, "You're going to be beholden unto Russia for energy," right? And he said, "It's going to come, and you're going to be in a tight spot." And he was fact-checked. He was mocked. Oh, Trump. Oh, now he's an energy expert.
Yeah.
That all over the news media. And of course, now what's happening?
Wow.
People are they're hunting in the forests for wood like they were back in the Middle Ages.
Wow.
Right now in Germany, because of their shortages.
Yep.
And because of what Russia is doing to them.
Yep.
But all of these things come home to roost. Now, I'll be wrong about some things, no doubt.
Yep.
We'll all be wrong about things. That's what prognosticators get. You get some things right, you get some things wrong. But man, we've been right so far about a lot of this stuff.
Yep.
And they're going to never apologize. By the way, the people that kept these kids masked, that now are seeing the data come out on developmental issues.
Yep.
Because of keeping these kids masked for
Bryce, did you see that
no risk?
CNN's top medical analyst, Leanna Wen, who was formerly the president of Planned Parenthood,
Yeah.
just came out and said that her daughter is having severe learning disabilities and delayed development because of the masking. And she said, I learned an important lesson about drawbacks.
No, she did.
Yes, this just.
Oh,
and
God.
Bryce, I was like screaming at my phone. I was like, "Are you freaking kidding me?" That's what we all said. We said that politics isn't an issue of drawbacks. It's an issue of weighing various risks and benefits. And we said that this came with huge risks, that this would be very detrimental, and it would have been better to allow herd immunity to happen than to entertain the delusion that a face diaper. The underwear that can't stop a fart doesn't mean that a mask can't stop a cough. I mean, come on, right? And we were laughed and we were reviled and we were mocked. And now CNN's top medical analyst is going, shoot, this was really damaging to my kid.
Still now, though, what they say is that, well, that was the best information we had at the time. And we were right at the time. You were still wrong.
Yeah.
We were right at the time. You were just bloviating and blowing this out your backside because you didn't really know, Seth, because we're the scientists over here.
Right.
You know, that because I've actually heard people make that kind of strange argument that, oh, no, we weren't wrong. We've learned some things now.
Yeah.
The science has developed.
Yeah.
Now we're operating under a new understanding of science. Back then, you were just operating under common sense, and we don't count that for nothing.
Totally. Well, to bring it back to sort of, the moral issues, just because, my podcast is a pro-life culture war podcast.
Yeah.
But we should talk about all the COVID mass stuff, of course. But to actually to bolster your point, but to apply it to what I do, we don't even need to be super informed about the data in order to not trust these people. Now, notice how I phrase that sentence, because I'm not saying it's unimportant to be informed about the data in Children's Health Defense and Robert Kennedy Jr. and vaccines and all that. I'm not saying that at all. Of course you should be informed of that. The Bible says my people suffer for lack of knowledge. And a watchman needs to understand the times he lives in. So I'm not saying that. I'm saying you don't need to know that to not trust these people.
Right.
Because we're talking about people who believe that men can be women, that women can be men, and that's just the science, Bryce. We're also talking about people, because all the top people who pushed all the mandates and the shutdowns, they're all pro-abortion as well. And they're all pro-transgenderism. So the very people who say follow the science,
whatever it is, they're in.
Right, believe that unborn humans are not persons with no rights, and that a man can become a woman. To which I said, Bryce, then I would like to take this time, an opportunity right now, at this moment in the American culture war, to speak my truth. And to say that I, too, also identify as transvaccinated. You see, Bryce, last year I announced that I was Sally. And I was able to liberate Sally from the bodily prison of Seth. So being very comfortable and accustomed with the path
I could see you as a
of
Sally.
liberating the real person from the bondage of biology, I have discovered the way, Bryce, to liberate my vaccination status from my unjabbed body. I may not have the spike protein, Bryce, because I never received the Fauci ouchie, but transgenderism taught me in my journey of coming out as Sally that the body means nothing, that biological physical realities provide no rational basis for who the real person is in the real world. And so because a woman was trapped in the bodily constraint of the Seth prison, then simultaneously, my vaccination status resided in my unjabbed body. And Bryce, I have to say this. I got to speak my truth. I always kind of knew that I was born in a vaccinated body. I always felt like I was supposed to be a vaccinated person. And so this journey has been so enlightening and wonderful to me. And all the trans-vax phobes out there who are saying that the body is the real you and that therefore you have a phallic and so you have to be a man, are the same people telling me that the body is the real person and so therefore the fact that I don't have the spike protein means that I cannot have been vaccinated, but they're denying my existence as a vaccinated person. Now listen, Bryce. If that doesn't make sense,
that well,
and that's nonsense, then so is transgenderism.
Well,
and if that's
you're
nonsense,
being consistent,
and transgenderism is nonsense, Bryce, then so is being pro-choice. You told me before we started recording today that you wanted to talk about how the spirit of the age operates in a very similar way and how these leading moral culture issues have something similar in common. And I'm here to tell you and your listeners today, it's an old heresy called Gnostic dualism or body self-dualism. And by the way, church fathers deemed Christians who espouse this as heretics. The church has declared this a heresy for centuries. Now, for people going, Seth, why are you talking about religion right now? Why are you talking about heresy? To wake you up, Christian, to the fact that the culture war was always just a proxy war for the spiritual war.
Amen.
To wake you up to the fact that we're not contending against an alternative politics. We're contending against an alternative religion. And leftism has body self-dualism as sort of its core religious tenet that undergirds and animates all of its political goals because they believe that the body means nothing. They don't believe, Bryce, that real persons are bodies. Body self-dualism teaches that the body is just a shell for the real person, which is why us as phallic holders can actually be women, Bryce. Why? Because the body provides no rational basis for who the real person actually is in the real world, which is why then I said, of course, then the biological reality of my unjabbed body does not prevent me from identifying as a vaccinated person. It's operating off of the same false anthropology of the human person. And this is what also enables them to be pro-choice. Because what do they say? They say the baby may be human, because I guess I have to affirm the law of biogenesis, Bryce, which states that all living things reproduce after their own kind. It has human parents, so I guess it's human, Bryce. And most pro-aborts will admit the unborn baby is a human. So it has a human body, but they'll say, but it's not a person and therefore doesn't have any rights. It's operating off of the same old ancient Gnostic dualistic heresy, which never made sense and always results in chaos and confusion. Oh, right, back to the top of the show. The spirit of the age and his followers and acolytes always want to create confusion and chaos. And let me debunk body self-dualism in a few sentences, and I'll throw it back to you, my buff, gracious host. If Gnostic dualism is true, Bryce, it means that you've never hugged me. You've never hugged your wife. You've never hugged your daughters because you can't hug thoughts, aims, consciousness, and desires. Remember, they believe the real person is their thoughts, aim, consciousness, and desires. That's what animates the real person. The body's just a shell that that person happens to live in. It also means that if psychologists, we're just meatbags. If a psychologist, Bryce, cures multiple personality disorder, he'd be guilty of mass homicide because each personality would have different thoughts, aims, and desires. Now, this, of course, is ludicrous. Nobody would ever contend for that statement in the real world, but it's the natural conclusion of this old, kooky, ancient, false anthropological view of the human person called body self-dualism. We have many reasons to reject it, but for the church, what the church needs to understand right now is, look, I just proved to you this was a spiritual battle. Christ says that's a heresy, Bryce, because what? He comes in a body. And when he rises, he doesn't rise as a spirit. He rises with the holes in his hand still to declare the truth that we are both body and soul. Both things matter. So that's this false religion that we're actually contending against. But you see, the politics always masqueraded as... the false religion always masqueraded as just politics or just the science to keep the politically impotent pastors silent.
Yeah, they do that. So I had Douglas Wilson on the podcast on my birthday, which was great. And
see, the FBI just raided their church gathering for worshiping and singing psalms.
Yeah.
Domestic terrorists, of course.
You sent me that. Yeah, they had a for those who have not followed that story, they have a summer gathering and like festival and that kind of thing. And the FBI had a presence there to watch out and look at things.
That's right.
You know, and made themselves known, but keeping an eye on these dangerous
Today's September
people.
1st, Bryce. Today's September 1st when we're recording this. This morning, bro, Karine Jean-Pierre, Jen Psaki's circle back replacement, just said again, that the real threat to democracy are the domestic terrorists known as MAGA Republicans. She just said this morning, bro.
Yeah, it's wild.
And Jen Psaki, back in May of 2022, she clarified less pro-lifers think that they're excluded from that political attack. Jen Psaki clarified in May of 2022. She said, when we say MAGA Republicans, we're also referring to those who try to impede a woman's access to health care.
Yeah.
So...
Yeah, no, I mean it's that
Domestic terrorists tuning out.
that is their that is going to be the catch-all. So, if you are patriotic of any way, they can just throw you in that bucket. If you, fly a flag at your business or, anything, they'll throw you in
to democracy.
If you have a copy of the pocket constitution.
Yep.
That's
well, the rosary. Did you see the piece over at the Atlantic? The rosary is actually now a sign of domestic terrorism as well.
Yeah, I wore my tactical rosary the other day. I had a buddy that gave me a rosary, and I'm not Catholic, but I threw on my tactical rosary just to make jokes about it.
Yep. We should wind down with this, Bryce. This is a powerful thing for the church to consider. What were the churches that Ruth sent us and Jane's Revenge, the pro-abortion domestic terrorist groups, what churches were they targeting in the leak of Roe v. Wade and then after the overturning? Bro, it was largely Catholic churches.
Yeah.
They were not attacking evangelical churches who, as Pastor Rob says, wait downstream to pick up human heartache that they helped create by their political apathy upstream.
Yes, true.
They were attacking the churches who they knew in the American culture war posed a threat to their regime and their goals. And so it should come as no surprise that the Atlantic smears the rosary as a sign of domestic terrorism. Now, you and I are not Catholics, but we do need to acknowledge this. Catholics have been far more faithful, contending for the lives of the unborn in the public square, than Protestants have been. Wake up, church. Who are they targeting? If you're not taking shots, you're not over the target. The reason they hate us is because we're compromising their sacrament of abortion, their sacrament of gender-affirming healthcare, and genital mutilation. What is it about secular progressivism, by the way, Bryce, that makes you want to chop up kids?
Yeah, it's wild. My wife's Aunt Rosie, by the way, just a testimony to the Catholic thing. She's Catholic, and her and Uncle Joe, wonderful people. God bless you, Auntie Rosie. Chokes me up sometimes thinking about just how sweet they are. But they go and stand in front of Planned Parenthood, I think weekly. I mean, pretty amazing. Where are we doing that?
Where are we?
Yep. Yeah. I don't know why that made me emotional, but anyway, love Auntie Rosie.
Yep.
But
and those will be the heroes one day, huh?
Yeah, dude.
At the marriage supper of the Lamb, when we're telling our stories, right?
Yeah.
And we're praising what God did through the church at this moment.
Amen.
Imagine the stories and witness that people like that are going to have. And there's going to be some Christians in heaven, Bryce, who will scrape by on grace and grace alone, praise God. But what's going to be your testimony at the marriage supper of the Lamb? What story are you going to tell? And your Aunt Rosie and the pro-lifers I work with and the pro-life leaders we have raised up at Godspeed Calvary Chapel and at churches that God providentially has used me to wake people up to contend outside of today's concentration camps will say, I stood outside of the doors of death and I pled for the life of the orphan doomed to die because you told me you love orphans and widows in their distress. And if we're to care for the orphan whose life is endangered because his parents are dead, how much more was I to care for the orphan in the womb whose life is endangered because his parents wanted him dead? And these children were born and fulfilled their purposes on this world that you knit them together in their mother's womb to fulfill.
Yeah.
Never forget what Jesus said about John the Baptist. He called him the greatest. The greatest. How did John the Baptist get killed? He called out the political authorities for public sin, and he got his head chopped off.
Yeah.
We need more John the Baptist
now. We do. And I'm afraid that America is moving in that direction with all that's going on.
Yep.
I know you commented on this, and I apologize. I didn't see the comments, and I apologize to your audience if you're going to repeat this. But I saw that you had a little clip where you talked about Seth Dillon on Joe Rogan's show.
Yeah.
And I wanted to get your thoughts on that real quick, as we're winding up here, because I have thoughts. I think he did a great job, except for getting sucked into that stupid rape argument that they always lead with. And Joe, I know him personally, trained Jiu Jitsu with him for many years.
Yeah.
I think highly of his evolution.
Yeah.
Wow. I think he's doing important things. And having guys like Seth on, and I've seen him just grow tremendously over the years. So good dude. But Seth got sucked into that. And what I do in that conversation when people go, well, what about rape or incest? I just start with, okay, let's say that we could somehow, negotiate that in.
Yeah. If I give
And
you
then
the
get
rape
rid of it
exception,
all.
will you join me to fight against ending all other abortions for all
Yeah.
other cases? And they say, no, of course not. And so I say, so why are you hiding behind rape victims to make yourself look more compassionate?
Yeah,
You
and
don't
I wish
support
you'd
abortion
said
in the
that.
case of rape. You support it in any case for no reason or any reason at all because you're a bigot and you deny the right to life to an entire class of human beings. If the mother shouldn't be allowed to kill her rapist who is guilty, why should she be allowed to kill her unborn child who is just as innocent as she is?
Amen.
We can do that whole thing. But they never cared about these things.
No,
it was
they
always
don't.
just about power and their political ideology.
And it's always about pushing us into a corner. And so, my advice to people, don't be pushed into that corner.
Yeah,
it
yeah.
represents such a tiny fraction of abortions that exist. So let's ignore that and let's address the real things that are happening here.
That's right.
Don't let them back into that corner.
Yep.
But anyway, what were your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, my only thought is this. I'm very upset that I was not the first Seth on Joe Rogan's podcast to publicly challenge his pro-abortion position. I'm a little bit pissed that there was another Seth that got to do that first. Those are my only thoughts on that. But speak life, Christian. Contend for life in the public square. Amos 5:15 says to seek justice and correct oppression. And to establish justice in the courts or in the gates. And it may be that that God will be gracious to the remnant of Joseph. Mm-hmm. And that's what the church needs to embrace today, that we're going to contend for righteousness in the public square and seek to influence secular governments for God's purposes so that maybe God will be gracious to the remnant.
Amen. So where can our friends get a hold of you?
I'm the CEO and founder of the new nonprofit, the White Rose Resistance. You can go to thewhiterose.life, thewhiterose.life. You can tune in for the Godspeed Calvary Chapel message from September 4th, if you're listening to this after September 4th, for my second tour stop for the White Rose Resistance National Life Tour. We talk a lot about the culture wars and the moral arc of the universe that tends to bend towards injustice, and the eugenic, bigoted, racist, Nazi-esque history of the abortion industry and their acolytes, and how it got us to our current political moment. And we tell the story of the Nazi White Rose Resistance and why we need a resistance movement in the church and in the country now before it's too late. TheWhiteRose.life or my website, SethGruber.com.
So, by the way, people should listen to your message, which is coming. I've heard your past messages, and you seem to just be with this particular focus with the White Rose Resistance. I mean, I think that the story that you tell about that, the genesis of this movement, I think is amazing, and people need to listen to that. People need to follow you because you're doing important work. I love that you're staying on this as this focus. It is one of these major battlegrounds of this day. Yep. And I used to shamedly, and I think I've talked about this in the past, take a little bit more laissez-faire approach to the pro life movement, and then of course having kids and starting to wake up to the reality of what's really happening, and then to really understand what these abortion doctors are doing and what this practice really is, and the barbaric aspects of it and everything else. And I realized that, this is one of these great evils that you cannot apologize for. Yep. And we have so many of those things now in our culture. Yep. And so we need warriors like you, brother.
That's right. Amen.
Yeah.
It's the turning point right now. Yeah. Whether we have a new birth of freedom or we descend back into the despotic chapters of history. And I'll say that our tolerance of abortion has really stunted our political and spiritual will in tolerating the genocide of baby image bearers. We have given credence to basically every other assault against the Imago Dei. And if you can't stand against the genocide of babies and the ripping of children apart in their mother's womb, what can you stand against? It's kind of a litmus test of the Republic and a litmus test of the church. So all hands on deck, Bryce.
All right, brother. Well, thanks for taking all this time, man.
Yeah, man.
Love you. Glad to see you in town.
Yeah, you too, man.
And looking forward to hanging out with you a little bit later.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, man.
Thank you guys for tuning in today. If you want more wonderful content and insights from Bryce Eddy and Pastor Rob McCoy, go subscribe to the Liberty Station Salem Network podcast, wherever you get your podcasts. as this conversation was simulcast on both Liberty Station and Unaborted with Seth Gruber. To give the show a rating and review and help us reach more people, go to iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you listen, and go subscribe at Rumble, because YouTube is cracking down on abortion misinformation and disinformation. Go subscribe at my Rumble account. Help us keep the word out and a voice of truth, sanity, and life in the digital square today. To book me for an event or see my speaking schedule, go to SethGruber.com. And to become an ally of the White Rose Resistance, to help me rebuild the White Rose Resistance for this generation against our silent but far more deadly holocaust of abortion, go to thewhiterose.life, thewhiterose.life. Until next week, I'm Seth Gruber, and this is Unaborted.